Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. Thanks for joining us. Well, we're going to talk about child abuse, but first, student mental health has been a big priority for educators. Let's get to it.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, something we might not be aware of that's very important is the emotional and psychological tolls that the pandemic has taken on our students and its effect on their lives as well as on their education. Joining me to talk about that and more is Rich Askey. He's the president of the Pennsylvania State Education Association, and Julia Szarko. She is the 2021 National School Psychologist of the Year. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Well, let's start with you. What are the tolls, emotional and psychological, that the pandemic and other stress factors in the life of students, how has that been working out?
We've seen so many tolls taken on our students. The disruption of the pandemic, it disrupted so many of our routines and security that our students have by coming to school every day. So with that, the pause in even being in school physically really set our students back in their social development, their emotional development, of course their academic development, and just their overall developmental stages. And we are seeing students at higher stress levels, along with their parents at higher stress levels, and certainly our educators at higher stress levels. And it's all impacting our student development. So what we've seen coming back to a little bit of a more regular school schedule this year, we have a lot of students that are just behind. And that academic pressures and the academic learning still needs to happen. So we're seeing an increase in the mental health concerns of these students because of that.
And that has to have, that effect, it translates into a huge series of problems in all sorts of ways for the schools.
It does. We're seeing a lot of stress also on the educators because it's straining them to meet the needs of the students. And we've been asking for, we've been advocating for a strategy to deal with mental health issues in our schools for quite a while. We need more school psychologists, more school counselors, more nurses, more social workers right now. So that's a real focus of our advocacy right now.
And we've talked before about the number of teachers. I mean, the teacher shortage is phenomenal, and teachers, submitting their resignations. I mean, that's another problem. And then when you take the emotional and psychological problems, it just compounds everything.
Yeah, educators feel like they have so much on their plate right now, just academically to catch up the students, and then as Julie is going to talk about more, the emotional and social issues that these kids are dealing with. So there is that stress on everybody in our schools.
Yeah. Well, let's go to the solution. What can schools do?
Well, we need more access to school personnel, such as myself, that can provide the mental health strategies and interventions that these students need. I mean, before the pandemic, we were already seeing a rise in the anxiety and depression in our students significantly, the rise in suicide attempts and ideation. And now with the COVID and the pandemic, what we're seeing in the research is showing we're at double or triple the rates before, and from what we saw before. And the other problem is that before the pandemic, about 60% of students that needed mental health treatment were not receiving any sort of intervention. Schools are often the only place that students can receive these services, especially our rural areas in our state and our country. We need more school counselors, school psychologists, nurses, and social workers to provide these services to students and support the teachers. Because right now, the mental health supports are often falling on the teachers and impacting learning.
Are the resources available for that? That's a pretty big task.
It is a pretty big task. I mean, just like the educator shortage, there is not as many counselors and psychologists out there as we would like, but with good funding and good programs, we think that we can make some progress in that area. Schools need the money to hire more psychologists, more social workers.
We do have a national shortage of our school mental health personnel, so we've been doing a lot of work to try to advocate to develop more programs. We need more more training programs for school mental health personnel and more funding towards that.
All right, let's run to a break. When we come back, I want you to talk about the effects of social and emotional learning, and what do we know about it? What more do we need to know about it? And we'll get to that subject after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Let's talk a little bit about social and emotional learning. We're hearing a lot more about those terms. What is it, and how does it help students?
Sure. Well, social emotional learning, really the best way to describe it, it's about teaching students those soft skills that they need for life. How to be responsible, be regulating themselves, how to interact with others, communicate, cooperate, all good things that students need to learn as far as to help with their actual academics, being engaged in the classroom, and then being able to work with others.
Yeah, it has to have a serious effect on learning. I mean, if you have this kind of stress out of it, and if family life is deteriorating, in part it can cause family deterioration. There's no doubt about it. It has to have a huge effect if it's that widespread on virtually every aspect of school life, right?
Yeah, I mean, what you brought up a good point by how it affects the family unit itself. It also affects the environment that the student is in, and so that's why we need these folks to be helping work through this post-trauma era for these students.
Yeah, are the skills that you're talking about, they transcend school itself, don't they?
Absolutely. It's we know, and first off, like you were saying, we know students with better social, emotional, and behavioral health learn better. It's a direct correlation, and it does. It transcends into their future, into the workforce, and how they can
and
be
their family life,
and their family life.
Well.
Yes, I mean,
yeah.
we have absolutely. I've worked with a lot of parents of students who are struggling behaviorally, and especially with the pandemic, they're behind. Kids just missed out on being kids and how to learn to interact with each other.
Sure. Well, what's the future? I mean, are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? Do we have the tools to deal with that? Are schools prepared? I would imagine that they're going through huge changes in the way they deal with students day to day.
I'm very optimistic. We have some wonderful social and emotional learning programs and curriculums, and because of the awareness out of the pandemic that our students need these skills more than ever, we're seeing more interest in providing these programs to students in the schools.
And the skills that they're learning are useful well beyond, the classroom, right?
Yeah, this is to lead them into success in life. Absolutely. The more they can develop relationships and feel that they belong and be in supportive learning environments, they're going to learn better. And then the more that they learn how to interact with others, they're going to be more successful in their futures.
Any help in the governor's budget?
Well, the governor certainly put forth an ambitious plan for public schools in his budget. And now we need to encourage our lawmakers to make the good decision. As we just heard in the past few minutes, the schools are in need of a lot right now after the pandemic. And it's not so much about the schools as it is our children.
Yeah.
And we need to invest in our children right now more than ever.
Yeah, and it has to be just absolutely dislocating in family life. You don't know. I mean, it has to just create one significant problem after another.
Absolutely. I mean, I can speak to some students where I've seen a rise in anxiety, a student that would have panic attacks in school because of all the pressures. I mean, students dealing with grief or with stress, and that's where I'm able to step in and be that safe space for those students to come to and work through and develop those strategies. But they need that at home. The parents are asking for help. They're begging for help. And we're here to help.
Before I let you go and go on to the next couple of segments, what's the School Psychologist of the Year now that you were named? What's that all about?
Well, I was actually chosen as the Pennsylvania School Psychologist of the Year in 2019, so that put me in the running, and was chosen as the National School Psychologist of the Year from the National Association of School Psychologists because of the broad work that I've been able to do and the advocacy I've been able to do on behalf of children to get them better access to school mental health supports and break down these barriers to their learning.
Well, look, I want to thank you for coming on. This is a huge topic and a hugely important topic, and I'm glad we could have you address it. All right, we're going to continue to talk about young people. We're going to talk about child abuse and see where that's all going to go, or where it has been and where it's going to go after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Well, I wish this was a topic we weren't going to talk about, child abuse, but it's important, and it's important to talk about. And joining me to do that is Angela Liddle. She's the president of the Pennsylvania Family Support Alliance and a frequent guest on the program. All right, before we get into the details, the impact, for example, of COVID on child safety, what you should do about reporting it, let's talk about the numbers, because let's get into, is it increasing? Are they increasing? Are they decreasing? Are they holding steady? COVID's probably have an effect on it. Go ahead.
Sure. COVID's affected everything, as we know. In terms of child abuse, our most recent data is from 2020, and we have some of the worst statistics we've had in our state's history. So we had 73 children killed as a result of abuse and neglect, and 115 near fatalities. That means without medical intervention, the children would have died. Yeah.
Wow. And so when you talk, you sent some statistics out. In 2020, there were 73 fatalities as opposed to 51 in 2019. But when I looked at these numbers, what really surprised me was the number of violent acts. And then you get into the lack of supervision in the families. I mean, these just go on and on and on. And if those numbers changed over time, or have they been pretty consistent?
They have. I think Pennsylvania is not an outlier, so this is a trend throughout the country. We're seeing more and more neglect cases. So the vast majority of near fatalities was because of neglect, lack of parental supervision. So we had kids who were, near drowning. We had kids who were ingesting prescription and over-the-counter medication, getting into cleaning solutions, things like that. It is frightening. And, one of the things we say, Terry, is that, we have now our very first generation of kids who are being raised in an absolutely dual universe. They're spending as much time almost on digital platforms as they are in the physical world. And so we really have a lot of concern about where's the parental or the adult supervision and oversight of that. Yeah,
I mean, what they watch on TV and what's on their cell phones and their iPads, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's a bit of a tease. I hope we can come back and talk about it another time. But, one of the things that Pennsylvania Family Support Alliance is doing, a new initiative to try to keep kids safe and help parents in this dual universe time, is we're going to be launching a family digital wellness initiative.
I want to come back to that. Yeah, I do want to come back to that.
Sure.
All right. You know, we've been talking about the impact of the pandemic on so many aspects of life. You saw we just talked about them when it came to the situation in the classroom for the emotional and mental health of students. But what's interesting, and you normally wouldn't put COVID-19 and child abuse on in the same sentence. So when you sent this material, I was actually quite surprised by the fact that they're interrelated.
Well, you know, we had a lot of social isolation. We're not completely opened up yet. You know, kids are back in school and have been, but there's still a lot of other things that families aren't doing. So there's social isolation. There's still an incredible amount of stress in families. The financial impact is still, families are reeling from that. If parents have had, you know, struggles with drug or alcohol, substance use disorder, addictions, the last 2 years certainly has not helped with that at all. And then we have the ongoing challenge of childcare in our state, where there is not adequate early childhood education for kids. Many childcare centers have closed. Many families now are in a position where they can't afford it. And
that's
so,
the effect, also partly the effect of COVID,
absolutely,
correct?
Absolutely. And so you put all of that together, it creates a bit of a perfect storm.
All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, I want to talk about, you know, if you learn about this, if you know about it, how should you report it? And then there are steps that should be taken to help prevent it. These are hugely important, and we'll get to those subjects in a few moments.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine.
All right, Angela, let's talk about reporting abuse. You know about it, you learn about it. What should you do about it?
Well, you need to call Childline, and that's 1-800-932-0313. If you suspect it, just make the call. That alerts the professionals then to check on the safety and the well-being of kids. Childline is our state's central registry. It is our child abuse hotline. So that alerts the system to check on the safety and well-being of a child.
Okay, how about child abuse prevention? What steps what needs to be done?
There's a whole lot that goes into that.
Well, let's start with some.
The very best step, the very best first step is positive parenting. And, you know, we need to pump a lot of money in our state and really nationwide into prevention services. A brief shout out to Representative DeLisio, who's introduced legislation that citizens can contribute to the Pennsylvania Children's Trust Fund. That's a vehicle for funding prevention programs statewide. So we need a lot more money going into parent education, family support programs, things that help parents do this really hard job.
And there's there are many forms of abuse. Sometimes we just think it's of sexual nature, but it's really much more widespread.
Absolutely. Child maltreatment, physical abuse, neglect, psychological, emotional abuse, sexual abuse. Sadly, sexual abuse is our #1 form of abuse in Pennsylvania.
Say that again.
Sexual abuse is the most prominent form of abuse as child abuse in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that does come as a surprise. I mean, we know it goes on, but I didn't think that would be #1. But you're the expert on this.
Yeah, well, it's hard for people to talk about it, but it's the truth.
Yeah, well, good. All right, good that you're talking about it. All right, April, National Child Abuse Awareness Prevention Month.
Yep, we spend the month raising awareness. This past Friday, we did the flag planting at the Capitol and the State Street corridor. So folks who are here in central Pennsylvania, they'll see the blue lights on the Capitol, the blue lights on the Market Street Bridge. Lots of thanks to the folks who came out, the advocates, the volunteers, the legislators to help plant flags. It's a time to remember the kids who've been abused, 4,600 substantiated cases.
Wow.
And then, of course, the 73 fatalities. So throughout the month, our organization is going to present a lot of wonderful opportunities for professionals to get involved and to learn more about the issue of supporting families and parents. We'll have our Spotlight Speaker Series. It's free. The continuing ed units are free. So we want people to visit our website at pafsa.org to learn more information. And we really want to thank the legislative leadership in the House and Senate. Children Youth Committee, Aging and Youth, these folks are doing messaging that will go out throughout social media all month long.
Now, is there a way to broaden that, you know, the programs that you're talking about, how to deal with it beyond, you know, professionals in the field to the general public? I mean, obviously this is one way by coming on this program.
Obviously, the message is clear. Everyone has a role to help keep kids safe. We want people involved and to learn how and what to do when they think a child isn't safe. So that's our effort with the news media partners and really with all of our messaging. Everybody has a role to play.
Yeah. There's something that you call, and I'm going to read it right here to get it straight, Digital Wellness Initiative. What's that? Well, first of all, what is it? And then I'm going to ask you, why is that important?
Okay. Well, what it is basically is an initiative to help parents learn how to best protect their children who are now spending almost as much time in the digital universe as they are the physical. These kids are spending between 5 and 7.5 hours a day on digital platforms. TikTok, Facebook, Instagram.
So are adults, but go ahead.
So are adults. The problem is our kids aren't always safe there, and parents need to know how to keep them safe. Very important. And if you heard about the case in Florida, Dad unfortunately shot and killed an 18-year-old man who met his daughter on TikTok and showed up at their house with a gun. So this is real danger. This isn't some hype that people are making. There's real danger to our kids, and parents need to learn how to get involved in protecting their kids.
And you have a practical guide for it, right?
We have a practical guide. We'll be launching this next month during Digital Awareness Day.
Okay.
So we hope to come back and talk to you in much more detail about that.
Yeah, but overall, that's a framework, and what would it do? Just give me a general description.
Well, it's going to, first of all, teach parents about the different platforms to help them then establish guidelines in their own family, in their own home, for monitoring their child's behavior online, teaching the children what's safe and what isn't into youth, and then really having a consistent effort, realizing that you have to monitor this every single day.
Yeah. Well, look, I think this is a hugely important subject, and I'm glad your organization exists to combat it. You getting any help from, before I let you go, we have 30 seconds, any help from the state government?
Always. Good partners at Department of Human Services. We know we never have enough public funding, so we rely on corporate sponsors. We appreciate them, individual donors, they're great. You know, we all have a piece in it, and it takes all of us together.
Well, thanks again for coming on the program. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.